Hello and welcome, Inspired Podcast community. This is your new episode. My name is Caroline, and my today's guest is David Ask. And I'm so happy that he said yes to our interview. How are you doing today?
Caroline, I'm doing great today. Thanks for having me.
Exciting. Our upcoming interview. Of course, I would like to introduce you to the audience first. You are an entrepreneur with products in over 3,700 retail stores, including major brands like the Home Depot, Lowe's, and True Value Hardware. As the lead coach for the True North Resiliency Program, you work closely with Dr. Andy Garrett to help individuals discover their core identity. You champion the idea that understanding who you are is key to unlocking your why. You are also writing a book, The Guardians of Grit, which is focused on empowering fathers to raise resilient and unstoppable young people. Welcome to the Inspired Podcast, David.
Hey, thank you so much. Thanks for having me here.
And I ask you the first question. It is, how has discovering who you are shaped your own entrepreneurial journey and success?
Such a great question. I'll kind of paint a little bit of an umbrella, picture first. We all have a unique, fingerprint. We have a unique retina scan. Where there's technology, of course, where you can identify people, based upon such things. But of course, right, we all have such a unique, heart, a soul. There's something so different about every one of us, down to our very DNA, which can, never be duplicated. And what I think is fascinating, a lot of people, including myself, for a long time, had a bit of a, kind of a vague understanding, of who I was, and uniquely, like, what are those things that really light me up? And, what are my unique kind of the hierarchy of values and convictions and virtues and things like that. And I like to say, by the way, Caroline, I like the word goosebumps. What is it that gives you goosebumps? Like when you hear something inspired, when you hear something that's very meaningful to you, it kind of puts, chill bumps on your arms or something like that. So for everybody though, when you put all those things together, it's really unique. And so to answer your question, when I started to, identify, right, identity, when I started to literally write down the things that really were unique to my psyche and my soul, it was amazing how, I started to gravitate to things that seemed genuine, that seemed natural, that seemed like they were, very authentic, right? We get that word authenticity from the word author, right? What did God, author in us, right? We didn't make us. So, someone else made me. I didn't choose any of this stuff. But when you identify, what God put in you, man, it's amazing how you start to operate in your own authenticity and you feel natural and normal. And for years I struggled with that. I thought identity was something that you achieved. So yeah, it's been kind of an interesting and a bit of a long journey, but I definitely feel, well more at home in my own skin now.
Wow, I love your answer. So identifying what God put in you, I call it how he meant you to be, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Or yeah, it's the same thing. Like how were you intended to be, right? This is, I
Yeah.
think, the correct English
I like it.
version.
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah, you were intended. It's like the David from Michelangelo,
Oh
the
yeah.
block, and then he said he removed everything that was not David. So we are not, and you said identity is something you earn
Mm.
or gain or however, and it is like he's just letting how he removed what's not David.
Yeah. I love
Yeah,
that. I
your
re-
name is David. Oh my God, I don't know
yeah.
what your name is. It is you in the
Well,
marble.
I like that. I remember hearing that years ago. I hadn't thought about that in a long time, but it's really true. There's so much that we, again, I'm getting kind of deep here, but when you're growing up, right, you have wounds, you have, things that are said to you and that happen to you and messages that you receive from, in all types of sources, right? Family members and marketing, you name it. And you end up kind of covering up, so much of just who you are. And when you start kind of removing some of that unneeded, junk, all of a sudden, the real person starts to emerge and you kind of start to live and breathe in a much freer fashion.
Oh, so true. Thank you for sharing. Yes, it's so important. As you said, it is deep. It's a deep subject
Yeah.
because you can, oh, I think you know this exercise with the, because you talk about who you are and then find your why. You know this exercise 7 times why or something when you ask, you keep on asking. And this is
Yeah.
also your name. So you ask 7 times why, and
I
yet
love
then you
that.
get deeper and deeper. Yes, I love that too. Okay, my next question, because I don't want to. So, can you share how the True North Resiliency Program helps individuals find their inner strength and purpose?
Yes, absolutely. So I met Dr. Andy Garrett. He's now a dear friend and we work together, of course, but I met him about 6 years ago. And, it's interesting. I mean, I forget who originally said this. There's nothing new under the sun, right? At the same time, it's amazing how, one person can say something in a different way or in a unique progression that really helps you to understand some concepts and maybe even disarm, or remove some, fear or, confusion around something. So when I met Dr. Andy, he just started basically just asking the right questions in the right progression. And, it really started to just kind of unveil, who I was and who I'm not and so on. And, it's amazing. Yeah, again, when you just start dialing in on those things, this idea of actually let me back up. I'm going to explain the term resilience and the term like grit. Those two things are different and a lot of people lump those together. So resiliency is simply just this idea of bouncing back quicker. So he actually has an analogy where, if you take, say, a basketball and you bounce it on the ground really hard, well, for a split second, it loses its shape, right? But when it bounces back, as it were, it goes back to a definable, measurable circumference. It's literally something you can name and put parameters on. Well, we're kind of like that as well. So when you've identified, who am I uniquely? What is it that motivates me? What are my strengths and how I want to apply those things? What are my convictions, my values, my virtues? Those are all different things, by the way. And again, a lot of people just lump all that stuff together. And what is it that gives me goosebumps, right? What is it that lights me up? Well, when you get knocked down, and that's a bit of a metaphor, it's not a matter of, I'm not just getting up quickly because I'm embarrassed, right? If you fall in the mud, I'm going to get up and just because I'm embarrassed, I'm going to run out of the room or, whatever that is. Someone who is truly resilient on an identity level is getting up um, very quickly, typically with a lot of joy, just because they're okay to just laugh at themselves. It's just not that big of a deal anymore. They don't have to prove themselves to anybody else, but they're getting up and they know why. They know the mission that they're on. They know that the mission is critical. They know that the mission means a lot to them. So of course, when you have that sense of identity, true north, and you've defined what is it that's valuable to me. Well, you're getting up for a very specific reason, as opposed to, I don't want to, I don't want to be down because I'm embarrassed or I'm people pleasing or I have shame or something around that. So this idea of grit, doing something like how does true north then really help you build a life? Well, life is hard, right? Life can not only be really difficult, it can be absolutely brutal. But if you want to build a good life, for yourself and for those you love, you're going to have some staying power. You're going to have some grit. You're going to have, some people call it moxie. It's like this idea that I need to do hard things over a long period of time because what's on the other side of that hill, as it were, is worth fighting for. So grit is really this idea that I'm building an internal motivation because I believe that what's on the other side of that hill is worth fighting for. Here's the funny thing, though. There's a difference between internal motivation, what he calls intrinsic, versus extrinsic motivation. And a lot of times we're doing things just because we're people pleasing, right? We want the applause of everybody around us, or at least we don't want to feel their shame. We don't want somebody to look at us like you're an idiot or something like that. And we want to, measure up, as it were, or at least, not I'll say it this way. For myself, for many years, I just wanted desperately to be somebody, or at least not be a nobody. And what's fascinating, the things that, have really shifted in me, for the most part, I mean, again, we're human, is I know when I get up in the morning what is really valuable to me and why I'm doing what I'm doing. But again, it starts not with why, it starts with who. I have to understand what is my true north, because Caroline, it's different than yours. It's different from my wife's. It's different from my brother and sister. And when you understand, that you are unique and you get to identify, right? Identity, those things that are so core to you, man, the who makes sense, the why makes sense, the what starts to make sense, the how starts to make sense. And here's the neat thing, whether it's an obstacle or an opportunity, you've then Andy Garrett, Dr. Garrett says you've predetermined the things that you're going to say yes and no to, whether it's an obstacle or an opportunity, which is really life-changing. Most people kind of, lick their finger and hold it up in the air, and whichever way the wind is blowing, there they go.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a long answer, but I hope that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I understood more about resilience, and then what is it not and what is it? And you said to us that it is the reason why you get up.
Yeah.
After,
True resilience is why you get up, but you're doing
yeah,
it from an internal, an intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic.
the ability. And I was thinking about your analogy with the, let's say, was it basketball or something, when you, the game. And I thought about the harder you are, you knock down the ball, the faster it gets back up, right?
Yeah.
It gets back, however.
Yeah.
So, and this is called resilience, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's more akin to, you're getting up for definable, reasons. It's like here's another analogy. So, a compass, right? It has, north, south, east, and west. So true north is not a compass. A compass is reading the magnetic field around it all the time. So you see the arrow in the compass kind of bouncing back and forth because it's always searching for north. Where true north is actually something that's like GPS coordinates. You've written those things down. They're not movable. You've literally written them in stone. Well, not literally, but it's, you've written those things down, as opposed to, okay, I'm walking into a room or with a bunch of people and I'm trying to read the room. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm insecure. I'm, or a job interview or a, whatever that is. Instead of trying to read the room or read the day, as it were, you know what? You've actually written down all of those things in advance, so you know exactly where you're going.
Wow, this is the best answer, because you explained the true north here. And I would always call, or I used to call my goal North Star, right? And the
Mm.
North Star is constantly moving, I think. Is it a fixed star? I don't know. I don't know about astronomy, so to say. But I think what you said is so important. You cannot aim for a goal that's moving, or?
Well, that's a really neat analogy. Yeah, I think what's fascinating is when you're guided, by your own soul. Let's just say it that way. Your goal then, shouldn't be moving a whole lot, right? It might just a little bit. You might find some nuance around certain things. But what's fascinating is if you know what you value, right? Your core values. What does your core happen to value most of all in this life? Well, your goals, would, I mean, therefore reflect that. So it's not like and by the way, your goal is not you're not necessarily looking for the results. You can't control results. You're guided from an internal, plumb line, yeah, North Star. I like your language there. And you're heading in a particular direction because it's meaningful to you. But guess what? Sometimes there's things that are out of your control. Does that mean you're a failure? No. You actually were following what you knew to be right and good for yourself. And the results, sometimes, there's a lot that can, come up. Your house can get flooded. Your COVID can happen and you can lose your business. I mean, there's so many things that are outside of our control. But if you're guided by that, that internal plumb line, then you start to feel, rather at home and confident in who you are and what you're shooting for.
Oh, I absolutely understand. So I learned something new, which is obvious, but it is overlooked that when you talk about core values, right?
Yeah.
I think you call it, the name is core values because they don't change. You
Yeah.
talked about identifying them, and then you know exactly where you're going. And this
Yeah.
is the true north.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, I like this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
I
like that.
learned something. Okay, I have another question for
Yeah.
you.
Sure.
What inspired you to write The Guardians of Grit, and how can fathers apply its lessons to raise resilient children?
Yeah. So I'm still in the process of writing that. I would say that, obviously, you know, children need to be raised, right? We talk about raising children. Well, what does that really mean? I like to use the phrase, we're causing them to rise, but not, to be like me, right? I don't want them to be like their dad for that matter. I want them to rise into their uniqueness. There's one of my favorite quotes. I feel like a broken record here because I mention this on almost every interview, but Benjamin Disraeli, who was a former PM of England back in the day, he said, "The greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own." And the first time I heard that, I thought, wow, what would that look like for a father to look at his, let's just say, father and son, to look at his son and to say, hey, my son, do you see what I see? I'm going to get the shovel out and just start digging and to find out what is just not just true about you, but what are the truest things about you that rise to the top, because I want to bring those out of you. I want to help you identify, right? Identity, all of that beauty and courage and honor and dignity and nobility. And what is it that gives you goosebumps, right? And I'm going to get underneath that and lift that up and cause that to rise. What if every dad did that? And what I feel like is happening for the most part, most dads are in survival mode, right? They're just trying to hold it together. Their parents didn't cause them to rise. It was more get out there and make a living, don't be a jerk, and be really nice. Just this really vague understanding about what success looks like. And I think that, this idea of being a guardian would presuppose that you understand these concepts, because you cannot give away something you don't have, right? I mean, if my son says, "Dad, I need $100," and I don't have it, I can't give it to him. If my son comes to me and says, "Dad, how do I navigate, this particular situation?" If I don't know how to do that, I can't help him. So I'm going after the guardians, right? I don't care if you're a mom, a dad, a coach, a mentor. If you have someone younger under your care, you have to understand these concepts for yourself if you plan to love somebody well, to cause them to rise. So when you start to identify what are the most powerful, courageous, precious, goosebump driven, places inside of you, well, guess what? Then you can start to do that for other people. So my goal in writing The Guardians of Grit, is to largely help dads. Of course, I'm a man, so I'm pretty partial to fatherhood, and I love being a dad. I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I'm just a really, really proud father. I've got wonderful children, and but Yeah, that's kind of the main reason I'm doing this.
Wow, this is so amazing what you said. And again, the David in the marble block,
Yeah.
it is so when we stay to this analogy, it is Michelangelo not revealing himself to the world, but
Mm,
showing the beauties of David. And this is what you said, showing the other person their beauty. And I wanted to say,
yeah.
because you used another word, but earlier you used the word value. And I think we have to value ourselves first. And this is when you said you cannot share something you do not have, right? So you have to value yourself first as a parent, and
Yeah.
then you can give that or show how to do this uh, to
You
your
know, it's
children.
I love that, and I think, part of it is this idea of being a confident person, let alone a parent. And confidence is driven, because you've identified all of that bedrock and you're actually operating, off of that matrix, right? You know your values and you're making decisions based upon those values. And it breeds a lot of confidence. Therefore, you can actually look at your children, or I mean the mailman for that matter, right? And anybody, and have a dignified, honorable conversation about very meaningful things, because you've established that for yourself. But again, if you haven't, good luck with that.
Yes, and once again, what you shared in the beginning, it starts by identifying who you are in order to find your why, and this is then your true north that um, gets you up every morning, every day, whatever you do. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, we can understand this. And please share where we can find you if you have special offers or services for the Inspired Podcast community. And now it's time for your last thoughts as well to the audience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, just go to my website, David Ask. So it's davidask.com, like it's like ask. Um, and and you know what? I'll leave you with that quote again. I love this quote. So if you're, whether you're a friend, a husband, a wife, a father, mother, whatever that is, the greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own. And I think that, for those of us who want to bless someone else, what's more impactful? Is it, hey, nice shirt, I like your shoes, or something, compliment like that? Or is it, hey, Caroline, I love how you show up this way. I love when you say this type of thing because I can tell it's meaningful to you. When you compliment someone's character, right? How about this? When you validate someone's character and how they operate in that sphere, you change their life, as opposed to telling them that they have nice shoes or something.
It's the inner beauty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this was so good. Thank you so much. Please reach out to David, check his homepage, check the books. They are all amazing. And I'm so grateful for our interview today. And I like your shirt.
Thanks for having me.
And see you in the next episode.